Hey guys, Mark here. This is part 2 of why VBA. Prior part 1 video was all about increasing the probability that you cross the chasm, which is to say, will you get the plane off the ground and start building cool stuff at work using code? I argue the probability you do so is highest using Excel VBA, and also that VBA is probably the best choice. The key parameter in answering the question, will you get the plane off the ground, is exactly the same as any other endeavor. Is it going to drive net dopamine? If you aren't driving with net dopamine, you are way less likely to get the plane off the ground while holding down a full-time job. Your biggest advantage is harnessing the combination of net dopamine and primary domain knowledge. The most expensive, difficult, and frustrating part of software development, as it's practiced today, is communication. All right? By that I mean the business side trying to articulate complex subtleties of the domain to software people. Let's see. By coding for yourself, you are cutting out this entire segment of the cycle. Okay? Think Frank Lucas goes to Vietnam. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to guess the outcome of playing the children's game telephone with 50 toddlers and you, or you by yourself. Okay? There is literally zero translation loss when coding business logic directly. Okay, so if dopamine is the main advantage, then what are the enemies of dopamine? Okay, there are two. The first is choice overload. All right, the modern roadmap for learning to code, it just has way too many options. Okay, especially for someone with a full-time day job. The result of choice overload is second guessing your decisions and then ultimately doing nothing. In order to learn, you have to do. Okay, learning is kinesthetic. All right, and that means any plan that involves IT saying, thanks for your efforts. Let's have the grown-ups take it from here now. Thanks, buddy. It's fatal, all right? Because you lost the kinesthetics of doing, creating, and making, and therefore of learning, all right? This is to say nothing about loss of leverage and loss of control. The second threat to dopamine is negative people, which I'm calling squawkers, shitting on the notion of you using VBA, all right? Our collectivist society puts people into boxes, all right? And in the age of hyper specialization, the boxes are getting smaller, all right? That sucks because, advancements that propel humanity upward are multidisciplinary often, all right? Antibiotics, Velcro, the internet, these are things that came about when, different industries or sectors or domains were fused together. All right, and it seems that today we're all sort of going down a channel of, super experts specialized in one area. So the collectivists will not be happy with your individual endeavor to build something using code because that's their box. All right, but since it's not polite to say that outright, they will instead say, oh, you should use Python, because they know that's not an option for you. Right? In other words, they're going to try to block action. Right? They already know you're going to succeed. IT people intuitively understand, whether consciously or unconsciously, everything that I've told you so far. All right? The good news about dopamine's enemies is assuming that you have domain experience in production. And you know what? This is the great news. All right? This is the best news that I can tell you all day. If you have domain experience in production, all right, you need only spend one single Sunday afternoon playing with the add-in, and most of you will agree with me. That's all it will take is a few hours of just earnestly playing around with this tool. All right, let me cut there for a second. At the risk of repeating myself from the earlier video, I won't do an example again, okay? Let's say that your company has an IT department with an annual budget of $5 million, all right? IT's rolling out a new enterprise time entry system, which costs $400,000 per year, and everybody hates it. all right? Then some random analyst in Cleveland office creates an internal tool using the dreaded and arcane VBA language, and people actually love it, all right? This implicitly shines a light on all of IT, okay? And it is fundamentally not supposed to happen, okay? This isn't just about organizational politics. It's human psychology. Let's go back to the American Revolutionary War. The British soldiers, they put on high visibility red jackets. Then they marched into wide open fields and stood in neat lines, right? This was by the book per polite European warfare standards of the time. Now, contrast that. The American revolutionaries, they fought with guerrilla tactics. They were adaptive and they leveraged their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. For you, terrain would mean the business terrain, okay? The domain that you know and that software engineers have no idea about it. And frankly, a lot of them don't want to know about it. I remember trying to, I was working with a guy and I was trying to explain the cap rate to him. It's like, okay, so you take the cap rate, divide the NOI by, and he's like, stop right there, Mark. He's like, I should not have to know this. He's like, I shouldn't have to know it. It's like, well, if you don't have to know it, then that puts a huge burden on me. It's like, I'm going to have to explain everything with just like massive, I'm going to have to basically write out all the formulas for you. And if I'm sort of writing out the formulas for you, why would I not just write the code myself? He walked it back a little bit, but the point, you see my point. All right. Now, imagine that you're a British colonel explaining to the English king, how your disciplined, well-funded army is losing to 10 dudes in the woods who, quote, just aren't following the rules. All right. This is, the fundamental story for IT and why your efforts in your project may not be well received. All right. And it's also a reason why the add-in product emphasizes stealth. If Mel Gibson walked into the middle of the field, he'd be dead. Another reason for stealth is it's empirically demonstrated that talking about your goals before you achieve them reduces the chance you actually do. All right. If I said I'll run a marathon, people nodded. All right. I feel like I'm a runner now. You're sort of short-circuiting the dopamine. My view is you want to keep your coding kind of like the Mona Lisa secret smile, all right? And if anybody approaches you, it's just say, look, I'm playing around on my own time. It's doing you no harm, all right? What exactly are you worried about? All right, until you have Dom Cobb. Once you have the Dom Cobb principle sort of behind you, you could be a little bit less stealth. All right, let me cut it there.